All right, so today we are going to be going over a Marklin pre-war gauge one locomotive, or actually a whole entire set. Uh, Locomotive 921. I believe in the 1932 catalog that I have downloaded, this is coming up as a model R66. I'll be honest with you, I really don't understand all the Marklin nomenclatures. Same thing with Bing. Really just starting off on this stuff. My collection is predominantly pre-war American, with some pre-war modern McCoy, things like that. But the one gauge, it's interesting because even though it's not as big as standard gauge, it doesn't look that far off. I'm actually going to be putting this locomotive together with another one, a 384, which, if you are a pre-war Lionel collector, I'm sure you're familiar with the 384. It's very similar in design as far as it's a, the smallest locomotive in the standard gauge line, or steam locomotive that is, for Lionel. Uh, you know, again, very, very nicely done. I don't know about you guys, but when I go out and I buy any type of pre-war item, I've always expect to have to do some work. Well, here's the work I had to do on this guy. Oil. That's it. Beyond that, it ran perfectly. And even without the oil, it ran fine, but the oil just helped it move along a little bit. So on this video is going to be split into two parts. It'll be one complete video, but you're going to see this part, which is, more of a detailed shot of the locomotive. One thing that you don't see in Lionel, and let me just separate this a little bit so you can get in there, is the detail. Marklin really went all out with this. There's a lot of detail in there. The locomotive itself it's heavy. This has got some weight to it. Oh, sorry, you're not getting into that. Apologize. Again, I have to clean it a little bit, but very well made, very nicely detailed. I do believe this is one of Marklin's smaller one gauge locomotives. I'm just going to put it back there. The lightning bolt represents that this is an electric locomotive and not a clockwork. And another thing I found out the other day, if you see, I believe, a red, which this is, it's a 20-volt motor, which means it'll run on a ZW. I believe if you see gold, it is a high voltage, like 48 volts, which I'm not going to run 48 volts on these things. That's getting a little too dangerous with, cats and kids that we have here. Again, a lot of detail. It's little things, though, that make these very cool. This door handle actually turns to open. And it's a very, very simple setup. It's just that. And yeah, that's how you lock it. I mean, that's just too cool. So, same thing with the end. We have the end cards there, sliding doors. Marklin really went out of their way when they made this. And obviously it's all lithographed and sheet metal, but still it has a lot of detail. These are embossed. You could feel them. These hatches. Yeah. Even the tender, if you look inside, they try to represent coal as best as possible. So, yeah, the next scene, I guess, will be this locomotive and this tender lined up against a 384, so you get an idea what they look like. And we'll go from there. Okay, so before we get into the size comparison of the trains, let's take a look at the size comparison of the track. Right here is our Marklin 1-gauge track. And we have roughly an equal length of, I believe this is an eyes, but it's a wide gauge. Standard gauge, pre-war, either eyes or flyer. Pretty rusty, but you get an idea. So I have a cutoff section of track, just the ties. And I'll show you real quick how this difference is. So that is the difference there. To put it a little bit easier, the 1 gauge sits right inside the rails of the standard gauge. So the difference is minute. I have a display track that uses the Gargraves 5 rail. And the 1 gauge straddles that almost perfectly, where it'll sit on the track and it'll look right. I mean, it's not, you can't run it on there, but it does sit there to the point where it can be displayed. Not perfectly, but again, for display purposes, it does work. To run it, you need 1 gauge. Now, this stuff is not easy to find. I actually ended up finding some in Germany. There's a dealer that I found via eBay, and he posts it every now and then. It's not cheap, but it's well made for the most part. You have to buy a little bit extra because it does get beat up. It is 100 years old. You can't expect that much from it. What I find very interesting, though, is it comes with, we'll call them tie clips, track clips. I'm going to try to do this one-handed. A little bit easier to show you this way. But basically, let me just, yeah, easier said than done when you're trying to take it apart, but there we go. So they lock into place with this thing here. It's such a simple but ingenious idea. And that fits into a hole right there. So every track is basically assembled the same way. The nice thing about this is, and I'm just going to try to show this for you guys, but yeah, my hand's going to get in the way. Start it. Goes into the hole, and then it locks in place. And these two are not coming apart. They will move, but only that much. The benefit to that is, once the layout's together, or once your rails are together, it's one solid piece, essentially. You do need to secure it somehow. And what I did was I just screwed the tracks down, or the ties down, drilled small holes. That was it. So now let's look at the comparison. So again, we have our 921 R66. We have a little tender right there. And now we have our 384. You can see right away the tenders are huge difference in size. You're going to see that sometimes, even within Lionel. But the locomotive, I'm going to try to line this up properly. The locomotives themselves, we'll get a top view, are almost the same length. And let me see if I could line it up. Yeah, they're almost identical length. Coming from the front side, Their heights are very similar. They're very much in proportion with each other. You know, the 384 has got more bulk here on the boiler than the Marklin, but that could just be, you know, a stylistic portion, I guess you would say. I mean, our tank engine's going to be a smaller, you know, a smaller boiler than an American style locomotive. That I don't know. We'll take the tenders away real quick because they're just, yeah, get them out. Again, we can look at the insides. You know, the Lionel's got some detail work. It's got its brass plaque, but nowhere near as much as the Markling. Just to get a comparison there, it's funny, the Markling almost looks bigger from my perspective. You know, I do believe, though, that the Marklings themselves have a much higher level of detail, even with a simple design like this. You know, the Lionel is a 240. This is an 040. But they definitely look proportionate to each other. They look in place. Obviously, you would not have a European locomotive on an American line and vice versa. Well, yeah, maybe. Then again, we're talking pre-war, so nothing's prototypical. But Marklin definitely went the extra mile. And, you know, if you've seen the video that I created about the Bing locomotive, the Bing locomotive is another nice-looking locomotive, but the amount of detail between the Marklin is higher. I also feel that the quality of the Marklin locomotive is much higher. Now, again, go back and look at my Bing video that I posted the other day, and you'll see that the Bing had its own set of problems with the motor and being at 48 volts or higher. This is a 20-volt motor. But the sheet metal on the Bing seems to be thinner. This is robust, is the easiest way to put it. The Lionel is heavier, but you also have this big heavy-duty cast frame. This, I think, is predominantly sheet metal. I don't think there's any real cast material in there. But, yeah. So, the next shot will be of this locomotive pulling its cars. Stay tuned. The final section of the video, the actual running of the 921 R66. Again, I'm only using a ZW. It works. It does its job. And if you look at my layout, it's a very simple layout. This is the small one. I originally built it as a small 4x6 track. It's now doubled to an 8x6 or 6x8. We have one outer loop of 1 gauge and then 2 inner loops of standard gauge. One is predominantly a trolley track, freight track, and then our passenger track. Obviously, I have passenger standard gauge that I run every now and then, but for this scenario, we're just doing, you know, freight set with a number 10 pulling it. So, let's see this guy run. It's a very smooth running locomotive. Again, I'm very impressed by the build quality. You know, Marklin knew what they were doing when they made this. And it really makes me want to get another Markling. Yeah, it's just so well made. And like I said, all I needed to do was give it a little bit of oil, and that was it. You know, if you compare it, again, to the Bing over here that we have in the other video, it's night and day the way they were built. Yeah. And just to show a few more things running here, let's get the trolley going. And last but not least, a little playground, merry-go-round, amusement park ride. So, like I said, the 1 gauge does not look out of place from the standard gauge at all. It fits in nicely. Let's bring it down here a little bit. And we'll end with the Markling going around one more time. It's a pretty loose-fitting AC motor, and what I mean is I'm going to kill power now. It rolls a little bit longer. You know, and that's not a bad thing. It doesn't take a whole lot of power to get it moving. And it could just be the way it was designed. You know, it does 20 volts, so it probably is happier at a higher range, but still within a ZW's range. Even though it's only put about what, I think 22, 23 volts from a ZW. I have a Type V if I ever needed to go to that. That's over in the corner over there. I also tried a Z4000. And it's fine with any of them. It's really, you know, comfortable with the ZW. I don't feel like I'm pushing anything. I've ran this for good 30 minutes straight without a problem. So, you know, again, just a very well-made locomotive. Very nicely done. Great detail. And, you know, I think this is going to be the start of a nice little collection of more Marklin pieces in 1 gauge. So, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you.